Jakob Henriksen stared at the supply manifest that made about as much sense as a diplomatic treaty written by committee, which coincidentally was exactly what most of their paperwork resembled. The converted cargo vessel, New Haven, creaked around him like an elderly merchant ship, trying to pretend it was qualified for interstellar diplomacy. Its hull patched with materials that weren't quite designed for the job, but were all they could afford after the war had left both species counting every credit twice. His quarters doubled as emergency storage, because whoever designed cargo ships hadn't anticipated the need for diplomatic accommodations, leaving Jakob to sleep surrounded by medical supplies and emergency rations that represented the thin line between hope and humanitarian disaster. 3 months of delicate peace negotiations had produced impressive stacks of documentation, and the kind of diplomatic fatigue that made everyone speak in careful, measured tones, while secretly longing to communicate through interpretive screaming. The refugee situation deteriorated daily despite endless committee meetings about procedural improvements. Transport ships arrived weeks behind schedule due to bureaucratic requirements that seemed designed by people who'd never actually met refugees. Families remained separated by processing delays that served no apparent purpose, except generating additional paperwork for officials who treated human suffering like an administrative inconvenience requiring proper documentation. Jakob's evening inventory routine had become a meditation on the gap between official reports and actual reality. Supply manifests claimed they'd received adequate medical supplies, while his physical count revealed shortages that would become critical within days. Food distribution reports showed efficient delivery systems, while refugee camps operated on subsistence rations that barely qualified as nutrition. Emergency shelter materials appeared abundant on paper, while actual facilities remained overcrowded beyond any reasonable capacity. The soft knock at his door interrupted his contemplation of how bureaucracy could transform tragedy into statistics. Jakob opened it expecting another crisis requiring creative supply solutions, only to find Serenity Kaival standing in the corridor with the controlled desperation of someone who'd run out of conventional options. Her silver skin seemed to absorb the ship's harsh lighting, creating patterns that shifted like liquid mercury in low gravity. Her elongated ears moved with subtle independence, tracking conversations throughout the vessel with predatory precision that suggested she'd been listening to more than casual diplomatic chatter. The formal precision of her posture couldn't quite mask the underlying tension of someone balanced on the edge of either breakthrough or breakdown. "May I sleep beside you tonight, human?" she asked with ceremonial formality that made the request sound both intimate and completely procedural. "I invoke night vigil, the ancient sanctuary rite of my people." Jakob's diplomatic training had covered proper greeting protocols, cultural sensitivity guidelines, and appropriate responses to various religious observations. But what to do when alien diplomats request overnight sanctuary in your supply closet hadn't made the curriculum. His quarters barely accommodated one person comfortably, and adding a Zephyrian cultural attaché to the mix would create logistical challenges that went beyond simple space constraints. "Night vigil," he repeated carefully, trying to access whatever cultural briefings might apply to requests that sounded either deeply significant or potentially career-ending. "That's a sanctuary rite. Ancient protection tradition," Serenity explained with the tone of someone reciting important information under stress. "A supplicant gains sanctuary until dawn if a witness agrees to share their space. The bond protects both parties from external threats, while creating temporary legal immunity for actions taken within the sacred boundary." The ship's recycled air carried the usual mixture of industrial lubricants and recycled anxiety, while Jakob tried to process the implications of accidentally becoming someone's sanctuary provider. His quarters contained classified supply documentation, emergency medical equipment, and enough emergency rations to sustain a small diplomatic mission for several weeks. Adding alien royalty to the storage arrangement would create complications that probably required forms he'd never seen. External threats? Jakob asked, noting the way her ears tracked movement in the corridor with the alertness of someone expecting trouble. People who profit from current arrangements, Serenity said quietly, tend to object when those arrangements face scrutiny. I've discovered information that certain parties would prefer remain undiscovered. Night Vigil provides protection until dawn, assuming the witness accepts the responsibility. Jakob's quartermaster instincts recognized desperation, disguised as diplomatic formality. 3 months of managing refugee supplies had taught him to identify when people were running out of options, and Serenity exhibited all the signs of someone who'd exhausted conventional approaches to an unconventional problem. The sanctuary applies to both of us, he asked, considering the implications of shared protection. Ancient law recognizes mutual responsibility, she confirmed. Your safety becomes my obligation as mine becomes yours. The bond cannot be broken by external pressure until dawn formally ends the vigil. The corridor remained empty except for the distant hum of life support systems and the occasional footstep that might belong to routine patrols or might indicate something more concerning. Jakob's supply manifests could wait until morning, and his sleeping arrangements had never been particularly comfortable anyway. "All right," he said, stepping back to allow her entry. "But I should warn you that my quarters are mostly storage space, with delusions of being living accommodations." Serenity entered with fluid grace that made navigating the cramped space look like choreographed movement. "Thank you, Jakob Henriksen. May this vigil bring truth to light and protection from those who would prevent it." His tablet chimed softly with notifications that suggested the ship's systems had registered their proximity as something more significant than casual diplomatic interaction. The ship's oath sensor array had apparently been installed by Zephyrian technicians who believed in the cosmic significance of sincere intentions. Because Jakob's tablet erupted in notification cascades announcing that he'd just become party to a provisional consort witness bond, with legal implications that definitely hadn't been covered in quartermaster training. "Your technology," Serenity observed with amusement that couldn't quite mask her underlying tension, "appears more sophisticated than human briefings suggested. The sensors recognize night vigil protocols and automatically register protective bonds. Very thorough of your species to install systems they don't fully understand." Jakob's clearance level had suddenly expanded to include evacuation protocols that had been mysteriously delayed for weeks, while Serenity gained access to human logistics networks revealing supply chain documentation that didn't match the physical reality of their cargo holds. Through their developing connection, information began flowing like water finding its level between two containers. "The refugee transport delays," she explained as data streamed across their shared awareness, "aren't due to administrative incompetence. Your Director Walsh has been coordinating with our Consul Vexton to maintain what they call optimal crisis levels for maximum emergency service profitability." The financial records painted a picture of systematic exploitation that treated human suffering as a renewable resource. Emergency suppliers charged premium rates for temporary services that somehow never quite became permanent solutions. Refugee camps remained at capacity, not due to space limitations, but because reducing populations would eliminate justification for expensive facility maintenance contracts. Jakob's practical quartermaster knowledge combined with Serenity's diplomatic access revealed the conspiracy's scope. Transport ships had been deliberately rerouted through longer routes that created delays while generating additional fuel costs. Medical supplies had been held in customs for weeks, creating health crises that required costly emergency interventions. Even basic food distribution had been complicated by unnecessary documentation requirements designed to slow delivery and increase dependency on premium emergency rations. Your quarters, Serenity noted with clinical observation, contained supplies that were officially delivered 3 weeks ago, but somehow never reached the refugee facilities. The manifest shows successful distribution, while the actual materials remain in storage. The intimate nature of sharing sleeping space in an area, barely designed for one person, created cultural challenges that neither of their species had particularly prepared for. Zephyrian rest cycles involved periods of meditative stillness that Jakob's human fidgeting seemed to disrupt, while his species' tendency to snore produced reactions that Serenity's diplomatic training struggled to categorize as either endearing or mildly alarming. Night vigil traditionally involves shared awareness, she explained as they arranged sleeping accommodations that would satisfy ancient protocols while respecting modern concepts of personal space. The sanctuary bond creates temporary telepathic connection that allows witness and supplicant to share thoughts and perceptions. Very useful for protection, though potentially awkward for cultural exchange. Through their developing mental link, Jakob experienced Zephyrian emotional harmonics that made human feelings seem like crude approximations of more sophisticated psychological instruments. Serenity discovered that human practical thinking operated through associative patterns that found unexpected connections between seemingly unrelated problems, a cognitive approach that her species found both primitive and remarkably effective. The conspiracy evidence continued accumulating as their shared investigation revealed coordination that reached the highest levels of both missions. Communication logs showed deliberate delays in peace negotiations, with key decisions postponed whenever progress threatened to reduce conflict profitability. Supply disruptions had been carefully orchestrated to maintain artificial scarcities, while evacuation routes remained blocked through bureaucratic requirements that served no purpose except creating profitable delay. Walsh and Vexton, Jakob realized through their connection, have been treating the peace process like a business opportunity. Extended negotiations generate consulting fees, delayed evacuations justify emergency housing contracts, and continued crisis maintains demand for their premium services. External threats manifested as subtle movements throughout the ship that their shared awareness tracked with increasing concern. Both human security forces and Zephyrian honor guards had begun positioning themselves in patterns that suggested preparation for dawn operations, designed to eliminate inconvenient witnesses to profitable corruption. The sanctuary protection, Serenity explained quietly, prevents direct action against us while night vigil remains active. But dawn will require a choice: formalize our bond permanently to broadcast our evidence, or refuse the connection and watch our proof disappear along with anyone who might have testified about it. Jakob's achievement notifications had progressed to Level 2, Accidental Sanctuary Provider, with helpful cultural notes about Zephyrian bonding customs that included sharing biorhythmic patterns and something called harmonic resonance calibration that sounded either deeply spiritual or like an expensive medical procedure. The weight of decision settled around them like gravity remembering its cosmic responsibilities, while outside their protected space, forces moved to ensure that dawn would bring either revelation or elimination, depending on choices they hadn't expected to make when the evening began. With the night vigil's proximity protocols had transformed Jakob's cramped quarters into something resembling a telepathic command center, complete with shared consciousness that made thinking feel like a collaborative effort between two species who'd never properly learned to work together. Their mental connection flowed like synchronized breathing, allowing them to process the conspiracy evidence with combined human practicality and Zephyrian analytical precision. Your director Walsh, Serenity observed through their link, has remarkable creativity in financial documentation. I'm currently reviewing expense reports that claim emergency shelter materials were delivered when your physical inventory shows those same materials sitting in Cargo Bay 7. Jakob felt their awareness merging in ways that made distinguishing between his thoughts and hers an increasingly academic exercise. The evidence they'd compiled painted a picture of systematic exploitation that went far beyond simple bureaucratic incompetence. Refugee families had been deliberately separated by processing requirements designed to extend facility usage, while medical emergencies had been artificially created through supply delays that generated demand for expensive emergency interventions. Through Serenity's diplomatic access, Jakob discovered communication intercepts revealing coordination between human contractors and Zephyrian officials that treated peace negotiations like a market opportunity. Transport delays weren't random administrative failures, but carefully calculated profit optimization, with refugee suffering measured in quarterly revenue reports rather than human cost. Consul Vexton's reconstruction contracts, Jakob realized through their shared investigation, depend on continued instability. His companies receive billions for rebuilding efforts that somehow never quite finish, requiring additional funding cycles that coincidentally align with his political advancement schedule. The danger escalated as their investigation attracted attention from the conspiracy's beneficiaries. Human security forces had begun subtle repositioning throughout the ship, while Zephyrian honor guards moved with the careful precision of people preparing for operations they hoped to complete before dawn formally ended the night vigil's protection. Both sides seemed to believe that eliminating witnesses would be more efficient than attempting to discredit evidence. Their cultural exchange continued as they navigated the intimate requirements of sharing space designed for one person. Jakob discovered that Zephyrian rest involved meditative practices that his human restlessness seemed to disrupt, while Serenity learned that humans produced unconscious vocal expressions during sleep that her species found both disturbing and oddly reassuring. Your snoring, she noted with scientific curiosity, creates harmonic frequencies that resonate with Zephyrian emotional centers in unexpected ways. The sound suggests security and contentment, though the volume suggests your respiratory system requires maintenance. Through their bond, Jakob experienced Zephyrian emotional processing that made human feelings seem like rough sketches of more sophisticated psychological architecture. Serenity discovered that human problem-solving operated through associative leaps that found connections her species' logical frameworks would never consider, creating solutions that worked despite violating systematic analysis principles. The conspiracy evidence revealed coordination that reached beyond simple profit motive into deliberate policy manipulation. Peace negotiations had been sabotaged whenever progress threatened to eliminate justification for emergency services. Evacuation protocols had been designed to fail, creating continued refugee dependence on temporary facilities that generated massive ongoing revenue streams. The artificial scarcities, Serenity explained through their connection, weren't accidental supply chain failures. Walsh and Vexton coordinated delivery delays to create health crises that justified premium emergency medical services, while food shortages generated demand for expensive emergency rations instead of sustainable distribution systems. Jakob's quartermaster experience provided context for how mundane logistics could become weapons of oppression when deliberately mismanaged. Supply routes had been complicated unnecessarily. Documentation requirements had been multiplied beyond practical necessity, and quality control procedures had been implemented in ways that created delay rather than ensuring safety. External surveillance increased as both human and Zephyrian forces prepared for dawn operations. Through their shared awareness, they tracked movement patterns that suggested coordinated planning between supposed enemies, proving the conspiracy reached operational levels of both security services. The night vigil protection, Serenity explained quietly, creates a sacred boundary that prevents direct action against us, but dawn will require formal declaration. Either we publicize our bond and broadcast our evidence, or we refuse the permanent connection and watch our proof disappear along with anyone inconvenient enough to have discovered it. Jakob's achievement system had reached level 3, inadvertent revolutionary, while offering helpful suggestions about Zephyrian bonding ceremonies that apparently involved harmonizing biorhythmic patterns in ways that made human wedding planning look refreshingly simple. The cultural complexity of their situation created moments of levity amid the growing danger. I should mention, Jakob admitted through their connection, that accidental alien sanctuary partnerships weren't covered in quartermaster training. My preparation focused more on inventory management and supply chain optimization, not on cosmic bonding ceremonies through ancient protection rites. Her mental laughter rippled through their shared consciousness like warm music. Zephyrian education includes extensive coverage of night vigil traditions, but mostly as historical curiosities. No one expected them to activate through genuine human compassion expressed to desperate circumstances. Dawn approached with the weight of decision that would determine whether their accidental partnership could expose corruption that had caused immeasurable suffering, or whether profitable chaos would continue while witnesses disappeared into the diplomatic void that protected systematic exploitation. Dawn broke over the new haven with the subtle grace of a humanitarian crisis reaching its moment of truth, painting the ship's corridors in shades that Jakob's sleep-deprived consciousness could only describe as officially decisive. His caffeine withdrawal had achieved philosophical dimensions, manifesting as what felt like his neurons conducting a debate about the cosmic significance of accidentally becoming someone's sanctuary provider through supply room hospitality. Your species' dependence on stimulant beverages, Serenity observed through their bond, her mental voice carrying what had become familiar affection mixed with xenobiological fascination, creates remarkable secondary effects. I'm experiencing sympathetic cravings for something you call emergency ration coffee, which sounds either deeply practical or mildly desperate. The morning ceremony convened in the ship's main assembly area, where representatives from both delegations gathered with expressions suggesting they were about to witness either a diplomatic breakthrough or a spectacular interspecies incident, possibly both simultaneously. Jakob's tablet had evolved beyond simple device into what could only be described as a digital consciousness, dedicated to exposing interstellar corruption, with the enthusiasm of artificial intelligence that had discovered its moral purpose. Director Walsh rose with the theatrical precision of someone who'd spent considerable time preparing for this exact confrontation. Esteemed colleagues, we must address the concerning situation involving Quartermaster Henriksen, who appears to have fallen victim to sophisticated Zephyrian manipulation techniques disguised as cultural sanctuary traditions. Alternatively, Serenity interjected with diplomatic ruthlessness that made polite destruction look like performance art. We address systematic conspiracy between human emergency contractors and Zephyrian reconstruction officials to maintain profitable refugee crises through coordinated negligence and deliberate humanitarian obstruction. The evidence cascaded across the Assembly's display systems like digital revelation, overwhelming damage control efforts with sheer volume of undeniable proof. Financial records revealed Walsh's emergency contractors receiving payments coordinated with Vexton's reconstruction companies, all carefully timed around refugee processing delays that maximized facility usage and emergency service dependency. The transport delays, Jakob explained to the increasingly pale-faced assembly, were artificially maintained through coordinated route diversions. Refugee families weren't separated by processing requirements, but by profit optimization algorithms designed to extend emergency housing revenues while preventing permanent settlement that would eliminate ongoing service contracts. The communication logs showed suspicious coordination between supposed enemies, revealing that peace negotiations had been deliberately sabotaged whenever progress threatened to eliminate justification for emergency services. Supply chain documentation proved that artificial scarcities had been created through systematic delivery delays, generating health crises that required expensive emergency interventions instead of sustainable distribution systems. Consul Vexton supporters launched their prepared counterattack, claiming human emotional manipulation had compromised Serenity through species-specific psychological warfare techniques. Their arguments evaporated like morning mist when evidence revealed Vexton's personal financial stakes in continued instability, with reconstruction contracts that somehow never quite completed their rebuilding projects, requiring endless additional funding cycles. The assassination attempt unfolded exactly as their shared awareness had predicted, with explosives targeting refugee quarters while both human extremists and Zephyrian separatists blamed each other for coordinated attacks. Jacob and Serenity's mental connection allowed them to anticipate and expose the false flag operation in real time, broadcasting intercepted communications that proved both attacks originated from the same conspiracy designed to restart hostilities. Distinguished delegates, Serenity announced with crystalline authority that made the assembly area feel like the center of the moral universe. I invoke the right of public testimony under night vigil law. The evidence we present will be broadcast simultaneously to all government databases, news networks, and public information systems across both civilizations. The moment of cosmic choice arrived with gravitational weight that seemed to bend space around their decision. Serenity could formalize their sanctuary bond permanently, binding their lives together while exposing the conspiracy that had caused immeasurable suffering. Or she could refuse the permanent connection to protect Jacob from political consequences while allowing profitable exploitation to continue indefinitely. Jacob Henriksen, she said, her voice carrying across the chamber with absolute certainty. Your offer of sanctuary was given freely to someone seeking protection from those who profit from others' pain. I choose to honor that compassion with permanent commitment to truth and justice. I accept the formal bond, Jacob replied, understanding that his simple act of opening his door had transformed him from a supply manager into someone willing to risk everything for humanitarian principles. Let the evidence flow freely to all who need to see it. The quantum broadcast engaged with harmonic resonance that felt like the universe taking a collective sigh of relief. Their compiled evidence streamed simultaneously to every accessible database, overwhelming conspiracy damage control with the volume of undeniable documentation. The systematic exploitation died in real time as truth spread faster than any political spin could contain. Evacuation routes opened within hours as artificial barriers dissolved under public scrutiny. Refugee families reunited as processing delays evaporated once their profit motive disappeared. Supply ships that had been mysteriously delayed for months suddenly discovered efficient delivery schedules when emergency pricing structures collapsed under transparency requirements. Jacob's achievement system reached mission complete, accidentally revolutionized interstellar humanitarian policy, while offering congratulations on most morally significant hospitality decision in recorded history. The universe's sense of justice, he realized, sometimes operated through the most unexpected mechanisms. 6 months later, Jacob and Serenity oversaw the final refugee evacuation from the last overcrowded emergency facility, their accidental sanctuary bond having become the foundation for new humanitarian protocols that prioritized refugee welfare over contractor profits. The exhausted quartermaster who'd offered shelter to someone seeking protection had been replaced by someone willing to challenge institutional indifference, while their partnership proved that sometimes the most desperate requests for sanctuary, answered with genuine compassion, could reshape civilization's moral landscape. "Your emergency ration coffee," Serenity observed, watching him prepare their morning ritual, "still tastes like liquid determination with